combat.
On this Memorial Day weekend, we look back at the Iraq War and ahead to continuing conflict in the area from the special viewpoint of Marine Reserve Major Jane Blair, who fought there. Her new memoir of it is Hesitation Kills, a female Marine officer's experience in Iraq, from Rauman and Littlefield Publishers. Welcome to our program.
Thank you so much, Melissa and David. I appreciate it.
You weren't an officer to begin with. Tell us what led you to join the Marines and how you rose to the rank of lieutenant by the time of the Iraq War.
Well, I started off from a very different background. I didn't have any family members in the military. I grew up in Miami Beach in New York, and so when I looked into going into the military, I started asking a bunch of Marines, what was the best avenue to join. And everyone I talked to said, if you want to be a real Marine, you should go enlisted first, because then you're going to know exactly what it's like. And so that's what I did. I started off, and, it was a very humbling experience for me, actually, because I thought I would be doing cool things like, storming beachfronts, and instead I was learning to swab the deck and scrub the toilets. But, all in all, frankly, it really made me into a better officer when I finally became an officer, because I really learned what it was like to treat Marines the right way.
What was your assignment in Iraq, and how dangerous was it?
I was the collections officer at an unmanned aerial vehicle unit, and we basically went ahead of frontline troops because we were an aerial reconnaissance unit. And, frankly, it was extremely dangerous. I mean, there were constant threats. You never knew what was going to go ahead of you. Especially during the initial ground assaults, we had no idea what to expect, whether gas attacks or whether, Scud attacks. We were pretty much left to any kind of threat ahead of us.
You also faced special challenges from male officers, doubts about your ability, and bullying because of your gender, though bullying seems fairly common in the Corps.
Reflecting back on it now, I think as a second lieutenant, there's a certain amount of rites of passage that you go through as a junior officer. Similar to maybe the police force or other professions like that. And so as a young officer, I think, it's kind of natural to go through that. And until you find your place and learn how to be a leader. And as a female, I learned I really had to become a Marine first, a Marine leader first, and not make any excuses. And once I started falling into sort of behavior of what was expected for me as a leader, I think it became much easier, and the female issue no longer seemed to be relevant.
What differences did you observe about the way male and female Marines dealt with fear, death, and the challenges of leadership, and how did you deal with them?
Seeing both the men and women in a combat situation, I really didn't see a lot of difference. People bottle up, I think, that fear a lot is what I saw on the battlefield, is really people internalizing the fears that they felt. And for the most part, the Marines were really courageous. It was amazing to see such young people out there and, sacrificing and not making excuses and just willing to fight even, at their death. So very courageous. For me, internally, it was very hard to come to terms with the fact that you could die at any moment. And I had to really grapple with that at the beginning mentally. But I think once you get enough adrenaline in you, you kind of just have to charge on with the mission. And it doesn't, you lose that fear a little bit because the adrenaline's so high and you're just going off and you kind of forget, you lose your perspective of where you are.
Where do you stand on an amendment to the 2012 Defense Authorization Bill that would lift all remaining limits to women serving in combat, in part to equalize chances for promotion?
Yeah, this is a very interesting issue that has surfaced as of late. I'm not a policymaker. And I think it's really a question for Congress to answer and to decide whether they are ready or if they want to make this change at all. We are a civilian-led military force for a reason. And, as a member of military, I defer to when Congress, if they ever think it's right for females to enter that role. But certainly I think if people want to get insight into what combat is like and from a woman's perspective, they should read my book, Hesitation Kills, and really draw their own conclusions.
Like many U.S. service personnel, you missed your spouse, but you also had special opportunities to see him from time to time, thanks to the Corps.
That's correct, yes. I was very lucky. I remember during a 2-week period when all the units were retrograding and they all combined into one central area, I had an opportunity to see my husband by chance.
He is also a Marine and now a Marine Reserve officer.
That's correct.
Since your service in Iraq, you've become a student of Arabic and won a master's degree in strategic studies. From that perspective, what changes would you have made to the U.S. strategy and tactics in Iraq?
That's a great question, because I think it's so important, having seen the difference from understanding a culture's language to not, and how my view of the culture has changed. I think it's so necessary for our troops, the military, to study the culture before they go there and to come up with specialized training throughout the world of different cultures. We live in a globalized society now. It's impossible for us not to have relations really with all countries throughout the world. I think that it would have impacted the way that we fought in Iraq had we engaged it from a more educated perspective, understanding the Arab culture more, the tribal systems, and the language for sure.
Well, given the resurgence of ethnic violence, do you think that anything short of another brutal strongman like Saddam Hussein can keep all of those rivalries in check?
I think that we are experiencing a great change now in the Middle East, where many different Arab nations are seeing that a strongman in place is really not the answer anywhere, and people are kind of taking social responsibility for their own countries, even in Iraq. I think it's phenomenal that people throughout the Middle East are realizing that there's a role for them in politics and in society beyond the usual. It's not just up to one leader to decide people's fate.
Marine Reserve Major Jane Blair is the author of Hesitation Kills, a female Marine officer's experience in Iraq, from Rowman and Littlefield Publishers.